Walk into any garden center today, and you'll see entire aisles dedicated to one thing: killing whatever's eating your plants. Sprays, powders, granules, traps, concentrates. Pick your poison, literally. And most of us have been conditioned to believe this is just how gardening works. Something shows up uninvited, you reach for a bottle. But step back for a moment and ask yourself a simple question. How did anyone grow food before 1945? Because that's roughly when synthetic pesticides became mainstream. Humans have been cultivating crops for around 12,000 years. So what filled that 11,930-year gap? The answer is plants. Specifically, certain plants whose chemistry evolved over millions of years to do exactly what we now pay chemical companies to do, and in many cases, do it better. With no resistance, no residue, and no collateral damage to pollinators or soil life. Traditional growers from the rice paddies of Vietnam to the kitchen gardens of southern France figured out which plants kept which pests away, and they passed that knowledge down through generations of hands-on observation. Today, I'm walking you through 15 of those plants, ranked roughly from useful to genuinely transformative. The ones near the bottom of this list will probably change the way you design every garden bed from this point forward. Stay with me, because number 9 is one most people aggressively pull out of their gardens, believing it to be a useless weed, when peer-reviewed research has shown it can crash aphid populations by as much as 80% in nearby crops. And number 13 is so quietly effective that farmers in Southeast Asia have built entire intercropping systems around it for over 3 centuries. If you're new here, this channel exists for exactly this kind of content. We pull apart the real science and the forgotten traditional wisdom behind growing food that thrives without you fighting it every weekend. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so the next one lands in your feed. Let's get into the list. Number 1. Marigolds, genus Tagatis. The history of marigolds in companion planting is so old and so geographically widespread that pinning down its origin is essentially impossible. We see them in Aztec agricultural records, in Mughal-era Indian kitchen gardens, and threaded through Mediterranean cottage plots going back centuries. The reason is not aesthetic. Marigold roots release a compound called alpha-terthienyl, which is genuinely toxic to root knot nematodes, the microscopic worms that destroy tomato, pepper, and cucumber root systems from below. Above the soil line, the flowers emit sulfur-rich volatile oils that disorient whiteflies, aphids, and thrips. A study from the University of Exeter documented that French marigolds reduced whitefly populations on adjacent tomato plants by up to 67% across a single growing season. That's a working defense system, not folklore. Practical use. Plant Tagates petula about 8 inches apart along the borders of beds containing tomatoes, peppers, or cucumbers. For nematode suppression, plant a full season ahead of vulnerable crops, so the root chemistry has time to saturate the soil. Number 2. Basil, Oxymum basilicum. Most people grow basil for the kitchen and stop thinking about it there. But the moment you place basil within leaf brushing distance of a tomato plant, you've activated one of the most chemically active pest defenses in the herb world. Basil releases estragol, linalool, and eugenol continuously through its leaves, and emission peaks during warm afternoons. Pests like thrips, aphids, and tomato hornworm moths navigate by scent, and basil's chemistry essentially jams that signal. University of Florida trials showed substantially fewer thrips on tomatoes intercropped with basil at a 1-to-1 ratio versus tomatoes grown solo. Basil also pulls in hoverflies, whose larvae eat aphids by the hundreds. Practical use. 1 basil plant for every 2 tomatoes, close enough that leaves touch, Pinch off flower buds to keep volatile oil production at maximum. Number 3. Lavender, Lavandula angustifolia. Lavender has been in continuous cultivation for roughly 2,500 years. Roman soldiers carried it across the empire, not as a luxury, but because it kept fleas, moths, and mosquitoes out of bedding and storerooms. The active compounds, linalool and linaloyl acetate, repel a long list of insects, but lavender simultaneously attracts bees, lacewings, and parasitic wasps, the beneficial predators that hunt aphids, scale insects, and caterpillar eggs. So you're repelling damage and importing reinforcements at the same time. Practical use. Plant lavender at bed corners and along pathways. Give it well-drained, slightly alkaline soil and full sun. Slight drought stress actually intensifies its volatile oil output, so resist overwatering. Number 4. Nasturtiums, Tropaeola majus. Treat these as decorative, and you're missing the entire point. Nasturtiums are the most reliable trap crop in the home garden. Aphids, especially cabbage aphids and black bean aphids, are drawn to nasturtiums more strongly than to almost any vegetable can grow. Plant them around your brassica bed, and the aphids concentrate there, leaving your kale and cabbage largely untouched. Once the nasturtiums are loaded with pests, you cut those stems off and remove them, or let ladybugs and lacewings clean them up for you. Practical use. 3 nasturtium plants per 4 feet of bed, edge around brassicas. Inspect weekly. Cut and compost loaded stems off-site. They regrow quickly. Number 5. Mint, genus Mentha. Mint is so aggressive it makes most gardeners nervous, and that aggression is exactly what makes it useful when contained properly. The menthol and pelargone in mint leaves are powerfully repellent to ants, cabbage moths, flea beetles, and aphids. Ants are particularly relevant because they actively farm aphids, protecting them in exchange for honeydew. Disrupt the ants, and you collapse one of the most stubborn pest cycles in the garden. Mint also confuses the cabbage white butterfly, which uses scent to locate brassicas for egg-laying. Practical use. Always grow mint in containers or buried bottomless pots near brassicas, carrots, and tomatoes. Crush a few leaves periodically and tuck them around the bases of vulnerable plants. Number 6. Chives, Allium schoenoprosum. The allium family, which includes onions, garlic, leeks, and chives, produces sulfur compounds that are deeply unpleasant to a long list of garden pests, including aphids, carrot rust flies, Japanese beetles, and many fungal pathogens. Chives in particular are easy to integrate because they're compact, perennial, and edible. They've been used in European kitchen gardens for over 1,000 years, specifically as a border plant around carrots and roses. Research has shown that chive plantings reduce aphid colonization on roses by significant margins, and the same protection extends to carrots and lettuces. Practical use. Plant chives in clumps along bed edges, particularly bordering carrots, roses, and lettuce. Let some flower. The blooms attract pollinators and beneficial wasps. Number 7. Garlic, Allium sativum. If chives are the gentle cousin, garlic is the heavyweight. Garlic releases allicin and diallyl disulfide, sulfur compounds so biochemically aggressive that they're being studied as natural antifungals and antibacterials in human medicine. In the garden, garlic deters aphids, spider mites, Japanese beetles, root maggots, and even some rodents. Traditional growers across Eastern Europe and Central Asia have planted garlic among fruit trees and rose bushes for centuries to protect them from sap-sucking insects and fungal infections. Practical use. Tuck garlic cloves around fruit trees, roses, and tomato beds in autumn for spring growth. The plants take up almost no space, and the harvest is a bonus. Number 8. Lemongrass, Cymbopogon citratus. Across Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and southern India, lemongrass has been intercropped with vegetables and orchard trees for at least 300 years. Western gardeners often relegate it to the spice rack and miss what is genuinely one of the most scientifically validated repellent plants in existence. Lemongrass produces citral, which makes up roughly 65% of its essential oil, plus geraniol and myrcene. These compounds are so disruptive to insect nervous systems that they're standard active ingredients in commercial mosquito repellents. A 2016 study in Industrial Crops and Products documented 90% mortality in spider mites exposed to lemongrass essential oil. As a living plant, it's emitting these compounds continuously. Practical use: plant clumps at garden borders, especially near beds with whitefly or spider mite pressure. In cool climates, grow in containers and bring indoors over winter. Crush leaves occasionally to boost local oil release. Number 9. Stinging nettle, Urtica dioica. Here's the one most gardeners get badly wrong. The instinct, when you see nettle growing along a fence, is to pull it out. Don't. Or at least don't pull all of it. Nettle is one of the most ecologically valuable plants you can host in a garden, and it works through a mechanism called the banker plant effect. Early in the season, nettle hosts small populations of nettle-specific aphids, which are harmless to your vegetables. Those aphids feed and sustain populations of ladybugs, hoverflies, and parasitic wasps. As your vegetable garden matures and becomes a target, those predator populations are already established and well-fed, and they spread out to handle whatever shows up. A 2019 study found gardens with nettle patches within 10 meters of vegetable beds carried aphid predator populations up to 80% higher than gardens without nettles. Practical use: maintain a small contained nettle patch at the perimeter, ideally in partial shade with consistent moisture. Use buried edging to control its spread. Harvest young spring tops for tea or soup. Number 10. Rosemary, Rosmarinus officinalis. Rosemary may already be on your windowsill, but in the garden it's a year-round defensive structure. Its volatile terpenes, 1,8-cineol, camphor, and alpha-pinene, are extraordinarily disruptive to soft-bodied insects and flying pests. Research in Pest Management Science showed rosemary oil sprays reducing spider mites by 52%, aphids by 43%, and thrips by 38%. The living plant emits these continuously and, being perennial in most climates, gets more effective every year as the plant matures. Cabbage moths, bean beetles, carrot flies, and whiteflies all avoid rosemary-adjacent zones. Practical use: plant in permanent positions near brassicas, beans, and carrots. In cold zones, large containers that overwinter indoors. Prune by 1/3 each spring. Lay crushed branches around vulnerable plants during peak pest weeks. Number 11. Dill, Anethum graveolens. Dill plays both sides of the pest equation in a way few plants do. Its scent confuses cabbage moths, spider mites, and aphids, while its umbrella-shaped flower heads are magnets for parasitic wasps and hoverflies, two of the most aggressive aphid and caterpillar predators in any garden ecosystem. Dill also serves as a host plant for swallowtail butterfly larvae, but the cosmetic damage from a few caterpillars is far outweighed by what dill brings to your beneficial insect population. Practical use: plant dill in scattered patches near brassicas, cucumbers, and onions. Allow some to flower fully and go to seed. The blooms are where the predator-attracting power lives. Number 12. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium. Yarrow is one of those plants that traditional herbalists understood deeply and modern gardeners have largely forgotten. It produces a complex blend of volatile oils that mildly deter pests, but its real superpower is as a beneficial insect platform. The flat clusters of tiny flowers are perfectly engineered for the small, predatory wasps, hoverflies, and lady beetles that handle aphids, mites, and small caterpillars. Studies in agroecological systems have shown yarrow plantings can substantially raise beneficial insect density across an entire garden. Practical use. Plant yarrow at bed corners and in pollinator strips. It's drought-tolerant, perennial, and effectively maintenance-free once established. Number 13. Chrysanthemums, specifically Tanacetum cinerarii folium. This is the one that quietly underpins much of the so-called natural pesticide industry. Pyrethrum chrysanthemums produce pyrethrins, compounds so effective at disrupting insect nervous systems that they're the active ingredient in a substantial portion of organic certified insecticides sold worldwide. Farmers in Southeast Asia and East Africa have intercropped pyrethrum with vegetables for over 300 years, specifically because the living flowers continuously emit small amounts of these compounds, and the pollen interferes with the reproductive cycles of multiple pest species. That's not just repellents, that's population suppression. Practical use. Plant pyrethrum chrysanthemums in clusters around vegetable beds. Note that the compounds are toxic to bees on direct contact, so plant them in zones where bees aren't actively foraging on adjacent flowering crops, and never spray pyrethrum extracts when pollinators are active. Number 14. Tansy, Tanacetum vulgare. Tansy was once a staple of every European farmhouse garden, planted by doorways and along livestock paths to repel flies, ants, fleas, and beetles. Its thujon and camphor content make it powerfully unattractive to Colorado potato beetles, squash bugs, cucumber beetles, and ants. Colonial American gardeners planted tansy alongside potatoes and squash for exactly this reason, and the practice held up well into the 20th century, before chemical alternatives pushed it aside. Practical use. Plant tansy near potatoes, squash, and along fence lines. It's vigorous, so contain it like mint. Avoid planting where livestock or pets graze, since the foliage is toxic if eaten in quantity. Number 15. Borage, Borago officinalis. We end on borage because it might be the single most underrated plant in this entire list. Borage does 3 jobs simultaneously. First, its leaves release compounds that deter tomato hornworms and cabbage moths. Second, its star-shaped blue flowers are among the most attractive nectar sources for bees and predatory wasps in the entire garden, dramatically increasing beneficial insect traffic. Third, it accumulates trace minerals through a deep taproot, and when chopped and dropped on the soil surface, it acts as a slow-release mineral mulch. Traditional English cottage gardeners called it the gardener's friend for a reason. It's been observed to improve fruit set on neighboring strawberries and tomatoes through pollinator attraction alone. Practical use. Plant borage near strawberries, tomatoes, and squash. Let it self-seed. Chop and drop older plants directly onto bed surfaces as living mulch. So that's 15 plants. 15 botanical solutions cultivated, observed, and refined by ordinary growers across thousands of years and dozens of cultures. What unites them is a single quiet truth. The pest problem was already solved long before we decided we needed a chemical industry to solve it. The solution was growing in someone's grandmother's garden, in a Vietnamese rice paddy edge, in a Roman herb plot, in a Mexican cornfield. Modern science didn't invent any of this. It only confirmed, often decades late, what attentive growers had already known for generations. And the deeper lesson is this: the most resilient gardens are not the most sprayed ones. They're the most thoughtfully planted ones. The ones where every plant has more than one job. Where the borders aren't empty space, they're working defenses. Where pest control is a structural feature of the design, not a reaction to a problem. The growers who figured this out weren't experts. They were observers. And now, you are too. If this gave you something real, a plant you're going to add, a strategy you hadn't considered, or a different way of looking at the corners of your beds, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and come back next week. We go this deep every single time. Drop a comment and tell me which plant on this list you're putting in first. I read every single one.